08087654321.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of the CGSL Show with me, Alasan Jalo. The CGSL Show comes up every other Sunday on Facebook Live choosing Generation SL. Recently, we started talking about people, Sierra Leoneans who've made remarkable achievements in the country and who've inspired others to do the same. But, as in Salon, we hardly get these people to the spotlight. People hardly celebrate excellence here. At CGSL, we believe in celebrating excellence, which is why we bring these people to the spotlight to share their stories with other communities. We hope these stories will inspire and motivate other people to come forward and contribute to the country's development. If you have an inspiring story to tell, reach out to us and we'll try to take it from there. Now, indisputably one of the leading and most credible journalists in the country, Umaru Fofana has been consistent in his career as a journalist, reporting on different activities in the country to Sierra Leoneans and the world. He's an international journalist who reports for the BBC and Reuters, and he's also the CEO of the Free Media Group that publishes the Politico Newspaper. His work in reporting on the happenings around the world. It's a long time ago. The Ebola outbreak and COVID-19 has been remarkable. I mean, people look up to him for information. However, like every other Sierra Leonean who tries to do things the right way and tries to be as apolitical as he can be, he has faced series of criticism from all political divides. We know now between them. He has been accused of being both an APC and SLPB journalist, but he hasn't flinched. He still continues to do the job that he loves, despite the many threats to his life sometimes. He's arguably the most followed media personality on social media in Sierra Leone. He's on several media platforms. And on the CGSL show tonight, Umar will talk to us about his life, his journalism career, and how it has impacted the country, and his experience navigating the tough journalism terrain in Sierra Leone. I should tell you. He will also talk about his own Sierra Leone and the direction the country is heading. Good evening, Umar, and welcome to the CGSL show.
Good evening, AJ. Thank you. Nice to have you. Thanks for having me.
Okay,
I'm used to hosting people.
How does it feel to be hosted?
It's interesting. You know, you've seen a medical doctor receiving an injection. It's quite an interesting thing. They literally have to fight before having that thing administered on them.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I don't know if you get asked this a lot, but how have you been? I mean, you've went through a lot over the past year.
I've been fine. Interestingly, some people are surprised. In their words, I look as well fed as I look because they feel that the pressure should have taken away a lot of kilograms from my weight. But no, my conscience is what keeps me.
Should we credit that to your wife?
Of course, she is a big additional factor to the fact that I've been able to remain undaunted in what I do. She inspires me a lot. She's a very quiet but stern woman. I'm very lucky to have her. So yes, a combination of factors, my conscience and my family.
Good evening, ma'am, if you're watching us. So tell us, who is Umaru Fofana?
Oh my, I don't know. But I think I'm this very controversial guy from a very humble background. I was born in Kono district to parents who had migrated from the north. Both my mother and my father were born in Bombali, and then my father was the first to migrate. He went to Kono district in search of diamonds, which he never got. And then later on, my mom.
Maybe you sold everything to the flag.
That's a good one. So my mom, who interestingly was also from Bombali, but her father had migrated to Pujahon to spread Islam, where he married the woman who would later give birth to my mother. And then she was raised in Pujahon, in Mano, and in Bombali. Which is why she speaks Fula, Mende, Tsimini, Mandingo very fluently.
Oh, wow.
And then I was raised in Kono, where I went to both primary and secondary school before proceeding to Makeni, where I attended the Benevolence Islamic Secondary School. And then I later proceeded to Forabe College, where I studied languages and some elements of international relations.
Okay.
I didn't study journalism because journalism was not being studied at Forabe College at the time when I was there. but I always wanted to become a journalist.
Okay.
You know,
So this is a lifelong dream.
It is. My father, who never went to school, somehow was a fanatical BBC listener. Literally, I mean, there are some people who said that I was literally born listening to the BBC. You know, because my father was a fanatical BBC listener and he would read newspapers because he had taught himself to read. You know, so yes, and my mother also never went to school. So my mother, my father, my paternal, maternal grandparents and great grandparents, nobody had been to school before me. So I was the first, or at least my eldest siblings and I were the first in our generation to darken the doors of school, formal school setting.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to private college and I pretty much had fun when I was there. And for some reason, my colleagues didn't want me to have fun as much as I wanted because they kept asking me to lead them. I was a Muslim leader of the Muslim Jamaat. I was president of the Student Union. I was clerk of the Student Parliament, you know, and on and on and on, you know, because they for some reason saw leadership in me because I had also led my school when I was in Janama and Kono district, and you know, and since I left uni, I've also led my colleague journalists. So I'm not sure for some reason, you know, they've seen me both as a good journalist and as a good leader.
Maybe you have some element of integrity that they always seem to.
Yeah, maybe so. It is something which it's a cardinal principle of my values because I train my kids by telling them that I don't keep money for them for the future. The money I keep for them is the money I spend on educating them. Because my parents struggled to send me to school. I had to mine. I mined for diamonds in Kono and in Tongo before I could get money to go to university. So I tell them that's the difference between what I am now and what I would have been, education. So I spend my money on my kids' education and on the education of people whom I'm not even related to. You know, if you're serious, you want to go to school and I can afford it and I do my assessments, I spend a lot of my income on helping people who want to go to school. So I tell them 3 values are fear of God, fear and worship of God, hard work, which is you either study hard or I mean, on graduation when you're working, you work very hard, and kindness, stroke integrity. You've got to imbibe those values in you, otherwise.
So for you, it's all about empowering your kids instead of saving money for them for the future.
Of course, I mean, what do I save money for when I'm in my surrounding? I've got dozens or hundreds of children who want to go to school but can't afford it. So I spend my money on helping those people in my neighborhood. Some far away from me, but I've got to know about them somehow. Some get in touch with me via messenger, and if I can, I pay their fees. Initially, I used to give them the money, but I realized that some of them were trying to hoodwink me, so I stopped giving them cash. I'll pay their fees directly to the school, or if they're writing their WAS exams, I'll pay straight to WAEC.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we can have more people thinking like that, unfortunately, a lot of people prefer to keep money or save money for their kids.
Well, maybe it's because I don't have a lot of money to save. So what I have to spend on people who need it. You know, but also I benefited a lot from friends. When I finished school, or when I wrote to my GCO level exams in Kono district, a friend of mine brought me to McKinney to study with him at Benin. He spent a lot of his resources on me, and we used his father's incomplete building at a place called Kolokolo, just underneath the Wusum Hills in McKinney. And students from other schools joined us to study. So he spent a lot of money. Now he lives in the United States, and I'm very proud of Brian Kamara. He believed in me, and that's what I want to pay forward by helping those that I can help.
Interesting. That's really interesting. That's very inspiring, anyways.
Okay.
Let's talk about your time as Slash president and what led you to that.
You know, I had become Secretary General of Slash before I ran for the presidency. And when I was Secretary General, I fell out with virtually most of the executive members because of my values. I didn't believe in the idea of people going to business houses asking them for money whenever Slash had a function. And particularly because there was no reporting mechanism. They would raise funds without giving proper account to Slash members. So because of that value, I fell out with most of the executive members. So I resigned 1 year into my office, into my time as Secretary General. So I resigned and concentrated on my practice. And when Jan Kaba was president of Sierra Leone, his bodyguards ruffled me up in Kono and unnecessarily, they handcuffed me. I had done nothing wrong. Apparently, they didn't like me because I held their feet to the fire. So I wrote a letter of complaint to Sludge, and Adi Kabo, whom I see as my mentor, refused to condemn the government at the time for all what they did to me. So I resolved to run for president of Sludge and change that.
But even though you see him as a mentor, he didn't come to
He didn't come. Apparently, he was causing up with President Kabo at the time. Which is why I have refused to cause up to president, particularly when I was Sludge president, because I thought that was going to be compromising to me both as a journalist and as a leader of the journalists. So I resolved on that day that I felt betrayed by the leadership of Sludge that refused to condemn the cruelty of the presidential bodyguards at the time. But the members, the newspapers solidarized with me. They published my letter of complaints, and they succeeded in embarrassing the government at the time for what the bodyguards had done to me. But the government did not take any action against the bodyguards. So I decided I was going to run for president of Sludge to ensure that if any journalist was touched, was harassed, Sludge would be there for them. And the records are there. Since my presidency, it's now become a tradition in Sludge that if you touch one journalist, you touch the entire Sludge membership. And the leadership will stand up and defend you. That was my motivation. And again, it is something which I've always thought about. My motivation for running for president of the student union of Florida College was because I was served food-rich food at the cafeteria.
So it all starts with you. And then
I'm like, this cannot be allowed to happen. So when I felt it up close and personal, I said, this must stop. So the lady who was running the cafeteria at the time, Florida College had only one cafeteria. So the lady at the time said, if you want to go cook in a room. And I'm like, this cannot happen. And I said I was going to report to the student union government. She said, look at them both, I don't cook for that, they can't cook for that. So I realized that they were being compromised. So I announced them that I was going to run for president. And when I won as special president, we had 3 cafeterias. So we forced them to provide good food. So that triggered me. And in the case of my Sludge presidency, my harassment and Sludge's failure to denounce that was what triggered me.
So you're always eager by something.
Yeah, I don't go into leadership fight for ambition. No, I go because I feel there's a need for it, and I can offer that. When I was working at the United Nations mission, UNAMSE, for example, they wanted me to be their leader. I said, no, there's no need for me to be leader here, because I feel everything is being done very nicely. So I don't want to be the leader, not doing anything, not really acting for you. But because United Nations operates in such a way, at least the mission there, operated in such a way that I wouldn't have much to do. I refuse to run for leadership. I have to run to be sure that there's need for me to lead and make that change.
Okay.
And not because I want to be.
Okay, let's talk about your journalism career. How did you start? What were the papers and what led you to the BBC?
I started off as a print journalist. I was writing, there was a paper called The Messenger. It's proscribed now, it's no longer there. So I worked there. A friend of mine, Abdul Karimba, with whom I've been in university, always had tremendous respect for my writing because I worked for Buffalo Press at Florida College at the time. So he approached me and said that somebody else had approached him to edit his paper. So I said, okay, I don't mind giving this a try. So we started The Messenger newspaper. Things didn't work out the way we thought they would, so we both left the paper. And then I always wanted to, that was in 1996, I just left university.
Okay.
Sorry, 1997, I just left university in 96. I worked at Amnesty International as a death penalty coordinator, because when I was at Florida College, I was a member of Amnesty International, I was chair of Amnesty, and I was able to bring Amnesty up to become a full group from a pre-group.
Okay.
So I worked with Amnesty International, and then Abdul Karim said to me, you should come and let us do this. I said, okay, I don't mind giving this a try. So they both left, because as I said, things didn't work out the way we expected them. And then there was a military coup of 1997.
Uh-huh.
So I worked for the Vision newspaper. That was one of 2 leading papers challenging the AFRC at the time. So it was Standard Times and the Vision newspaper, and later on Independent Observer. So I worked with Vision, and later on became the editor after the editor went into exile in Conakry, partially because he kept coming and going. And at that point, the BBC correspondents here, Victor Silva and Lance Fofana had fled. So I'd written an article for a British newspaper which the BBC liked. And then the world wasn't the way it is now. There was virtually there was absolutely no internet. Because it was in 1997 later on that Sierra Leone got connected to the World Wide Web.
Okay.
And mobile phone was a real luxury at the time.
Uh-huh.
So the BBC tried to get in touch with me via Vision newspaper telephone number. And then they got in touch with me and offered to be doing some reporting for them. So that's how it all started in 1997. And I got shot in my line of duty in October of that year. And I was
Reporting for the
tortured.
BBC?
Yes, reporting for the BBC. You know, the active people now are much younger than then, so they don't get to know about this that I've gone through, which is why I'm not scared. Nobody scares me in this country anymore because I've gone through the crucibles. I was arrested when President Kabata's house had been gutted by the Air France regime on the 9th of October in 1997. And by then we didn't have mobile phone. It was around, but very few people had the analog mobile phone, which was Mobitel at the time. So I have to go.
So how you send? Okay, I forget to say. I started with the English. I was going English, but we usually do this.
Go switch, yeah.
Yeah. So how? What was I asking? So how?
That's what I was reporting at the time.
Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. Nobody, well, very few people now appreciate what we had to go through, the rigors we had to go through at the time to be able to bring the news to people in Sierra Leone and around the world. I would go to SLET, which is now Sierra Leone. I would go down to Sierra Leone and I would call the BBC. There's what they call, I don't know if it's still like they used to call it the Americans would call that what do the Americans call it? Collect call. And then the British call it reverse charge call. So I would pick up the phone at SLET and I would call 444, and then a computer in London would pick it up and I would tell them I would like to talk to this number. I would call the BBC number. And then they would call the BBC. There's somebody who is calling you from Sierra. His name is Umaru Fofana. Will you pick the call? It's very expensive. So the BBC would say, no, will not pick the call. And I would rush to the vision office. So we start sit by the telephone box there until they would call me back.
Oh, wow.
Or they would pick up the call, which is very expensive. And they say, we'll pick up the call. So they'll pick up the call, we'll talk, I would say, I have this story for you. They'll say, okay, we like this story. So go back to the office, do the script, we'll call you on the line, and we'll record the report down the line. Or they will say, okay, fine story, do it, and I'll telex the report, or I'll fax the report. So that was when if I faxed it, you would not hear my voice, because somebody would voice the report in London. Because fax meant just filing the paper.
Yeah.
And then somebody would pick it up in London at the office and they would voice
Yeah,
it.
although I'm beginning now, I don't understand.
Well, yeah, it's all old these days, man. That's no fax, no telex. Very people know about those things these days. So that's how I used to report. Yeah, so I went to Kaba's house and somebody told the soldiers at the checkpoint at Juba that I was asking for Kaba's house. Because I had actually spoken to a lady on the bridge going to Juba. And she said she had no idea where Kaba's house was because I didn't know the house. So on my way there, then they went and told the soldier that I was looking for Kaba's house. So they just chased me. They shouted from a distance, stop. I couldn't run, obviously, they had guns. So I stopped and they came very close range. They shot me in my right leg.
Oh, wow.
They shattered my tibia bone and I was hopping on my left leg. They kept hitting me in the head, kicking me out. Whenever I fell down, they would force me to get up. They took me to, there was a tree driving up to Kamasa Lodge from Juba. There was a tree standing there. So they lent me by the tree, and one of them actually pulled the trigger to finish me off. Split seconds, one of his colleagues pushed him, and the bullet hit the tree on which I was leaning. So that's why I'm still alive today. Yeah, so later on, the soldier came and said to them, take him to the hospital. He's not a spy, he's a journalist. So they took me to a hideout, and they tortured me. They lit polyethylene plastic bag, they dropped in flames on my back. They urinated in my mouth, they forced me to swallow.
Did you tell them you were a journalist?
They knew already that I was a journalist. And that was why they didn't like me. Air France didn't like journalists because they felt that we were standing in their way to staying in power.
That's only Air France did.
Exactly, government don't like us.
They don't like it.
They were more brutal because they had guns and they had no constitution to respect. So yeah. So it's that's how it's been.
Okay, so I mean, you've witnessed this, and then you still continue reporting on and on. But I was a journalist as well. I know how difficult it is to get information. How difficult is it to be a journalist?
It's very difficult. It was far more difficult until the libel law was repealed last year, because then even the law criminalized outrage. But now it's the bigotry, both those in power and those in opposition have, to tell you what to report and not you reporting what you should report. And sometimes it irks me because I feel that who are you to tell me what you want me to report and not me reporting what is correct but factual. And then it gets so bigoted that sometimes they threaten you with death, they insult your parents, they put all sorts of incendiary things about you on social media, they fabricate things and just try to get your attention. It's your ability to develop that firewall around you And that thick skin, that will keep me going. And that is what has kept me going. Because I've just turned a blind eye and deaf ears to those who want to influence what I report. Not by speaking the truth, but by using me as a ventriloquist, which I have never allowed and never will allow, whether somebody likes it or not.
I mean, you've been targeted at both SLPP and EPC, where you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because it is what it is, to be honest. Because I
Are
was.
you SLPP or APC? I'm going to ask.
I never know, and I'm interested. I've never voted for those parties.
You've.
Never.
Oh, wow.
I've never voted for them.
You have one of them. I've voted for both.
For about 10 years, I didn't vote. When multi-party democracy was brought back in 1996, I voted for Desmond Luke for president. I knew he wouldn't win, but my conscience lay with him at the time. And I voted for Sana Bangura for parliament. Again, I knew she wouldn't win. That's when we voted the proportional representation. And I didn't vote ever since. I refused to vote until in 2018, when I decided for the first time since 1996, that's when I decided to vote again. I thought there was a candidate that deserved my vote.
In what year?
In 2018, in the
You
last
did it,
election,
okay.
I voted in the first round.
Uh-huh.
In the second round, I didn't vote.
Why?
Because
Okay, so for you, it's the candidates, not the political party?
no, it's stupidity that ties people to voting for party, regardless of who comes forward in a country like Sierra Leone, where the parties stand for no ideologies. If you are in America and the UK, you would tie yourself to a party because the party stand for ideologies. If you believe in gay rights, you'd vote for Democrats in America. If you believe in women having the right to abort their pregnancy at a certain stage, you'd vote for Democrats. If you don't believe in those two, you'd vote for Republicans. If you believe in the rich getting to be taxed more than the poor, you'd vote for Democrats. If you believe in the poor and the rich paying tax at par, you'd vote for the Republicans. Because these are ideologies. We don't have them here. Here they are tribal groupings called political parties. Why would I tie myself to a tribal cleavage and not what the party stands for? My conviction.
But how do we change this?
Education. And education, because it's not just because education brings it about, because some of the bigots now are highly educated people. But I say education because the less illiterate you have, the more difficult it becomes for the bigoted educated ones to hypnotize the uneducated. Because they'll ask more questions since they have an education. And if more people are uneducated, they'll have to cling on to what the bigoted educated ones tell them, and they would accept that hook, line, and sinker. So the more people that get educated, the less bigotry the corrupt educated ones can imbibe in them.
But most of these young people who follow these politicians, you'll say they are educated as well. Most of the young people serving in this current administration are university graduates, are just recent university graduates.
They are in the minority. The majority are my mother, my father, my uncles, my aunts, my nieces who live in remote areas, uneducated. So when those few educated ones go there, they accept whatever they tell them because they're a land book. So until those in the remote areas also have an education,
So I'm saying,
hopefully the next generation.
so I'm saying, if they want their way the land book now, if they're not honest enough to tell them people don't, how do we change that?
And because they're not playing to the land book. So the one that they go tell the lie, when they say land book, they go ask and challenge them. They go ask more questions. So that all man gets some basic education. Then the one that will land book, will lie to the one in the land book, will get few people there for lie to.
Okay, yeah, so may I ask you a question? You say in both times when you vote for China and this other person we mentioned, you say say they're not a win, but you still vote for them. Why?
Conviction. Desmond Leak had up to then proven very consistent. He had served as foreign minister, among a lot of things. So I believed in him. And the platform he presented was convincing. So was Zainab, who had been a civil society activist. And I thought that if she went to parliament, she would be a very good parliamentarian, bold, brilliant, and audacious.
But then you knew they were not going to.
Yeah,
was there something you could have done to help them win?
No, there was nothing I could have done. I was a now. And unfortunately, even though I'm influential now, I cannot side with any side. Again, because of the nature of the job that I do. That's a catch-22 situation I find myself.
So then it becomes an issue of your love for Sierra Leone and your love for your job?
No, my love for my job is the way I exhibit my love for Sierra Leone. So that they are not mutually exclusive. So it's entirely up to you to know that these are the ills and these are the good things, and then you decipher and make a choice. But it is not for me as a journalist, not least as probably the most respected in the world journalist in Sierra Leone, to give an opinion as to who to vote for.
So you'd rather you just decide?
I would rather I just do what I felt was right and let the people decide for themselves.
Okay, so another question is, how do you get information? I mean, the reports. How do you do your reporting to the BBC? Most times people say, okay, Umaru, they pick the thing the way they report. Look, SLPP they can do so thing to the APC party. And not reporter. When now we do small thing, the reporter. How do you pick your stuff?
It was like that when Tijankaba was president, and I'm like, no, I mean, Tijankaba never liked me when he was president. But after his presidency, he and I became friends.
Why? I should ask.
Because
Why did you like
I held him accountable. Invariably, and Nkrumah and I were very good friends before he became president. He will tell you. He was the reason they sacked me at the UN radio. I was doing a very popular show at the time called Tea Break. And I held the Kabbalah government to account. And they misunderstood me to be siding with Nkrumah and his APC at the time. So they took me off air. So it's not new to me. I've lived this life all my life. And I remember somebody saying that Tijankaba sitting over Bali Bobo, any two in APC. The woman who later became his wife, IJ, was my vice president when I was Unitarian president.
Oh wow.
I appointed her as my vice president, and she didn't understand why I did what I did. And I said, this is my job. I'm committed to my job. That's what I'm committed to. So, but also sometimes, because of the advent of social media, my impact has become so huge that everybody wants to influence me. Before this time, if I reported something on the BBC and you did not listen to it, chances were that you would never get to hear it. But in the last 7 or 8 or so years, if I report something you didn't listen, it will be on WhatsApp, it will be on Facebook. So you get to hear it without having heard it on the BBC transistor radio. Or you go on the internet and listen to it. So because of that, I'm getting more pressure now than ever before. But the truth is, it's not everything that is news on Democracy Radio or on AOL or on SLBC, on Star Radio, that is news for the BBC. I'm competing with 51 or so other countries on the continent of Africa. And I'm competing with the rest of the world, all the 190-something countries in the world, for audience. So it's not everything that is news here that is news to somebody outside of Sierra Leone. So when things happen here and somebody thinks this is newsworthy, it is not newsworthy for a global audience. So my ability to wait, and sometimes, to be honest, I pitch stories and the BBC says, no, we don't think this is worthy of being told for the outside world. It does happen sometimes.
Okay.
But people who come, they don't ask me to explain to them, they come attacking me. And I just ignore them.
Okay, so you were in the attacker until again now, not all 3 will report. If you don't know about news brand. Anyways, in case you just joined us, you did listen, you did watch this Chosen Generation CGSL SHOW live on Chosen Generation Facebook page, Chosen Generation SL. And tonight we talked to Umaru Fofana, a now salon journalist, one of the most popular salon journalists in the country, where he can give you information. In fact, me self they rely on that because as soon as a reporter, so I'm not saying that too. In most cases.
That's my pressure, because Wolishenka says the ripest fruit is the saddest. When man will take it back, the raw one really stone, and the red one in the stone.
Yeah.
So Solomon Umaru says it's gospel truth. So let's force him to say it, whether it's true or not. And you don't get me to say it just because you want me to say it. I say it because it is factually authenticated.
Okay, we get some comments. Well, I don't know. I think people in the way like I don't know about police placing. It's my Salim Kumar. They say he's a chair Umaru Fofana. The candidate should be the focus rather than the party. I'm with you on this one, sir. Now we talk about the same candidate to the vote. Myself, I don't know. I should have myself candidate to the vote. I don't care. I don't care which party wins.
I mean, to be honest, if the parties were based on ideology, we will vote for them. But it's not there.
Okay, I should have this also. Being qualified is different from being educated. This is Shakuma, this is business, you're finance journalist.
Thank you.
Anyways, Umar is one of our hope in Mama Salon. Nobody's very possibly president. Yeah, I'm not a magic Mama. Then on top of that, no team for support. You don't support Manchester United. Why? Best.
Would have been through trials and tribulations. I'm not sure that's come away too. But anyway, we shall.
We're going to have to show. We are not going to point you at now because what's that?
Really? That's come away? Yeah, that's a little.
Alright, so let's talk about this one. The slogan, you get the slogan, say, fix your Leone's parliament and the country will fix itself. How?
Parliament is so powerful that if they do their job, how they're supposed to do it, the executive arm, the judicial arm will probably get no choice but for getting right. Parliament gets oversight responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first areas I covered as a journalist, one of my first bits was Parliament. And I don't think it has changed much, but I remember going on field visits. For example, the Parliamentary Committee on Transport would go to Lungi, for example, and they would have money given to the parliamentarians by the Sierra Leone Airport Authority. I mean, what would you expect them to come back and say about whatever, failings they had seen at the airports? Would go to like Guma Valley pipes and other sites. And at the end of it all, would go to somewhere in Wilberforce. I think that's Guma Valley base, Wilberforce, around Bottom and we get in there and we see the parliamentarians receiving envelopes from the Guma Valley management. And I thought that if they had seen anything wrong with Guma Valley's sites and operations, they would be tongue-tied to go back to Parliament and hold them accountable. So I believe the Parliament performs its oversight responsibilities very well. The failings we are seeing at MDAs will be brought down to the minimum, to the bare minimum. So that is my conviction that fix them. They pass the laws. They would not pass bad laws. They will scrutinize. We've seen parliamentarians here pass mining lease agreements that gave precedence to the lease agreements over our country's Mines and Minerals Act. That would have been influenced only by one thing, the mining company. So I believe that if we fix our parliament, they function as they should.
But
Things will straighten themselves.
okay, so let's talk about the oversight committee. So Parliament will say, okay, fine. Even if we go in a Lungi airport, we'll see all that we can't talk about what change with that impact. Whose authority then get for kind of like say, okay, you know what, Lungi will not do this.
They have the power. They can summon the minister. We've been to Lungi Airport, for example. This is just hypothetical reasoning. We've been to Lungi Airport 3 times, for example. We've met zero. I'm not saying this is what obtains now, but let's hypothetically say there's no fire engine at the airport. And they say we've gone there, we've not found any fire engine there. We've been there, we've found that the main hall, the passenger lounge, the toilets are not functioning. And the Lungi Airport, the Sierra Leone Airport Authority fails to take action. They would now call the minister and hold him accountable. They are very powerful parliament. It was Congress in America that stopped Donald Trump from becoming a dictator. The courts and Congress. That's how powerful they are. So if they function the way they should, our presidents would not be kicking butts and ignoring all things Sierra Leone because they're not accountable. Parliamentarians are not appointed, they are elected, which is why they are the only body that can remove the presidents because they were elected in the same way that the president was elected. They are very powerful, but I'm not sure they're using their power the way they should in our interest.
But you often see the executive Muslim parliament.
Probably compromise, not Muslim. Because the executive does not have the power to muzzle parliament. Parliament has powers of its own.
We had a situation where the APC was majority parliament and then the judiciary just installed 10 other parliamentarians in parliament and then nothing happened.
I'm not talking about exactly set of parliamentarians. I'm talking about parliament as an entity.
Okay.
So that it is not a matter of the opposition at the time standing up for what is right and those in power standing up for what is wrong in the name of protecting their party. It's a case of all parliamentarians knowing that it behooves them to do what is right for the country and not for their party's interest. Which is why I feel that, for example, 77K of our constitution should be got rid of. Because that provision obliges a ruling party MP to sit and vote with the party that's under which it was elected, that the person was elected to go to parliament. So that if you are only a party MP, you feel arm twisted by that provision. What happens? The party can frame you up and then eventually they expel you. And in that case, you're no longer a member of the party that under which you were voted to parliament. You cease being a parliamentarian. Khalifa Smart wanted to take action against some renegade MPs in the parliament of 1996, the ENPP. And bizarrely, probably not surprisingly, the APC and the SLP members of parliament sided with the rebellious MPs so that Khalifa Smart could not remove them. They stayed in parliament. Fast forward, years later, a parliamentarian who had gone to parliament for the PMDC sided with the APC and the SLP MPs wanted him to be removed. What they had done previously to side with the renegade MPs against Khalifa Smart was what came and haunted them because it was clear that Legacy Sako was the MP, had sided with the APC, but he couldn't be removed because something they had sided with came to bite them. Because the APC in power at the time sided with this MP. So don't do what is wrong just because it's convenient for you. Do what is right, whether or not it is convenient for you.
But how do we change this? I mean, how do we get parliamentarians within that? I mean, we have like Honorable Ibrahim Conte, who actually stood against his party, but then his fellow parliamentarians, none of them supported him. He was like a lone wolf in the parliament. The other honorable actually eventually apologized. For how do we get people like Honorable Ibrahim Conte into parliament when, as you say, the way we vote here, if the SLPP puts a candidate in Kaila, everyone will vote SLPP, even though the APC candidate will be better. How do we change this?
Many reasons. I don't have a quick fix solution to that, but I think one fundamental way to deal with this would be strengthening democracy within political parties. Our parties lack internal democracy. They do not necessarily choose their party's candidate for parliament based on the competency of the person. So when that incompetent individual gets the party's symbol and ends up in parliament, they feel obliged to the party and not even to the voters. So if you have internal democracy within parties, whereby the party, ordinary party members will get to directly choose their party's candidate for election, then when that MP goes, that person goes to parliament, they clearly know that they were sent there by their party's members in the first place to be the candidates, and then by their constituents to be their MP. So they answer more to the people than to the party. But if all it takes is for a party leadership to be pleased with you and choose you as their candidate, your interest is going to lie in the party leadership. So they'll give you the symbol again to run for parliament. So if you have internal democracy within the parties, in which case people are given symbols to run for parliament based on merit and the conviction of the people, then the MPs will become more accountable to what is just, and to their constituents.
But then it all boils down again to these parties having ideologies, strong ideologies that they believe in, which is non-existent. So how do we get these parties there?
Democratize these parties. It's never too late. Democratize these parties. And I'm very pleased, we should all be pleased as Syrians, that the APC has gotten rid of its selection clause. That was, in my view, undemocratic. So now that they've also gotten rid of that, and now they are saying you have to be a candidate for parliament and president through primaries, elective primaries, more or less joining what the SLP has been doing. We should probably ask all the parties now to also do what the country's constitution says, namely, you cannot, for example, be your party's standard bearer until you have got 55% of the delegates' votes. Whereby you fail to get that at the first ballot, we should have a second ballot until you're able to get 55%, which is what our country's constitution says. I mean, I have my views about that. I feel that if somebody gets 50% plus one in an election, they should be the winner because they've got more people voting for them than voting against them. But if what our country's constitution says is 55%, it would be good for the parties as well to have that in their own constitutions.
Okay, if you're just joining us, this is the CGSL show, live on Facebook Live choosing Generation SL. I think you're on YouTube as well. We'll amplify that eventually. Tonight we're talking to Umaru Fofana, a renowned journalist in Sierra Leone, and a guru in Salon affairs. This guy should be president.
Stop that. They are already afraid. The politicians are already afraid.
I'm kidding. But there's this question. What do you think about the direction that Sierra Leone is heading at the moment?
There's a lot that we need to do as a nation. And this goes both for those in politics, and by politics I mean those both in power and those in opposition, and as citizens. I have argued that we have over-concentrated on the politicians, so that we have ignored our own frailties. When I interviewed Ernest Koroma in 2011 about Sierra Leone's 50th independence, and I asked him one question: whom he thought had been the country's best president or best leader. He gave it to two people. He said to Sir Milton Nagai and to Sheikh Stevens. And I challenged him on both, but for the purpose of this interview, I'll say I challenged him on the issue of Sheikh Stevens. I said, but he is blamed for a lot of the undermining of our democracy, one-party system, scrapping of local council, local government, and all that. And then he said something which I felt was really powerful. He said, don't always blame it on the leadership. Also blame it on the followership. So which is why I believe that we as the ordinary people, the non-politicians, we should also blame ourselves. Chalo, if everybody decides to not be the fourth passenger in the back of a car, no driver will overload. A driver only overloads because somebody is happy to be the fourth passenger in the back of the car. So that if somebody wants to come out overload and there's a passenger in the back who says, no, we don't need three. Interestingly, the two other passengers will insult that one passenger who is standing up for what is right. Go back to your motorcar, let the man can sell push. So we have to stop that mentality. What is wrong, we must stand against, no matter who does it. What is right, we must stand for, no matter who does it. So I believe that we can handle national cohesion a lot better than we have for many years. So we've been paying lip service to national cohesion. We say it this way, and then the other way, we do something completely different. So I think we need to cohere, and that has to start with the way our leaders represent us, and the way they make us see them representing us. That is a fundamental thing. But I also believe that we've got to be genuine in what we say. We have to reflect that on our behavior. Accountability should not be a lip service thing. It should be a reality. We must be accountable and hold everybody else accountable. And as non-politicians, as a public, we must have this. It's not only when somebody is indicted for corruption that we do not like, that we celebrate their indictment. Or someone we like, when they are indicted, we denounce the indictment. No. What is good for the goose must be good for the gander. We should be patriotic enough to support the fight against corruption, no matter who is indicted.
Do you think Sierra Leoneans have patriotic?
Our patriotism is highly flawed. I don't think most of us are.
Okay.
Most of those who criticize because they want to pre-position themselves to get jobs. And most of those who defend because they want to be given jobs at the moment.
So it's not about focus and
it's about the self.
Focus.
It's about the self and the interest mostly, and not about Sierra Leone.
What would you say to young people who are in the habit of doing that? Because in most of these issues, most of these things are taken up by young people. Young people are people who insult people who try to criticize activities of government.
Yeah,
failings.
Yeah, I don't think it is only the young people. I mean, there are older folks whom you'll expect something from that don't do. I have faith in the young people. Of course, it got, like with every generation, it got the spoiled ones. But I believe that the young people of today are doing a lot more than the young people of, say, my father's generation did. When I was growing up, I used to accuse my father of conniving with the system that brought about what I was born into. And I never wanted my children to accuse me of connivance at that same thing. So I always try to ensure that I don't stand with the wrongdoer. Yeah, and I believe that the young people of today, because of technology, the leaders must always know that they cannot rule this country the way it was ruled in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. When the Ghost War was on, for example, it would take days and weeks before you would know in Freetown what had happened in Buja. But now something happens in the far corner of Sierra Leone. Next second, it's on your phone. And this is something they must have in their head in leading us. That the younger folks of today are demanding, they are demanding for accountability and fairness, and they are informed, better informed than generations
Like
ago.
the issue that happened in Kono with the president.
Exactly, like with many other issues. If, for example, people had said their bits about what was paining them in Kono, namely that they wanted electricity, if that had happened before the advent of social media, we would not have known about it until probably now. But we knew about it seconds after it had happened because somebody was filming with a phone. The phone is a powerful tool that I feel that young people must use for good and not for bad because it can be also very, very divisive and vicious in spreading falsehood, hate, and insightful messages. So I think it's like I tell university students, don't spend all your time on your phone, on Facebook, and on WhatsApp. There is on your phone what is called Google. If you Google anything there, you can get some of the results that your lecturer might not have given you as notes in class. Unlike YouTube, don't go to YouTube to look for sensations. Go to YouTube. Students in South Africa built an aeroplane, only learning it on YouTube, and flew the plane by only learning it on YouTube. So you can do wonders with that thing called a phone if you want to. And you can set back yourself and the society if you also choose to do that.
Okay, if you spoke about accountability and young people who lead elected officials to account. What's your take on the suspension of the auditor general? I mean, we now have a tribunal. I don't know if it has started or anything.
There is a tribunal, and this is something which I'm going to be reporting on. So because of that, I don't wish to express my opinion.
What about the African Express findings?
I believe people should have the right to research and publish as a wish. I've spent most of my adult life defending and fighting for people's rights to express themselves. So be it the African Express, be it any other press, people must have the right to express their opinion.
But Jabal keeps saying that he does not receive enough support from journalists in the country. I mean,
that is for journalists to decide.
You're one
I
of
think
the
they're
journalists.
collective. No, I mean, he's a journalist. I'm a journalist. He's publishing and I'm publishing. You understand? And probably his own modus operandi and mine can't be the same. I am obliged by the BBC to always balance my reporting. I'm obliged to not publish anything about you, Jalal, until I've heard from you, unless you turn down your right of reply. Because the right of reply, you also have a right not to take a right of reply. You can say, I don't wish to reply. So I'm bound by the BBC's very high standards of fairness, balance, and accuracy, among others.
Okay. So what are your hopes for Sierra Leone?
I've never given up on Sierra Leone. Never will I give up on Sierra Leone.
I mean, you've never left.
I have chosen not to migrate. I have never left Sierra Leone. I've had so many opportunities to leave, but I've always refused to leave.
Why?
Because I love this country. I'm not saying those who have left do not love the country. I believe that staying here and doing what I do will add value to Sierra Leone than leaving. The only thing I have decided of late that I will leave for is to go and study and come back. But to say I will migrate, I've never countenanced that, and I never will countenance that. I've had the call, even job opportunities. I've been offered jobs abroad. I've said no, thank you. I just want to be here. I love it here.
Do you find peace here?
Absolute peace, stability, and love. I go to places, people say hello. Have you ever talked to any Syrian living abroad? It pains you. I have a friend who once called me and said, Umaru, I'm calling you because I want to talk to someone. I've been here for 3 days at the back of the street. Nobody really talk to me. I greet someone, they really answer the greeting because I the culture now. They greet person, a lot of people for greeting the greet. So I really love it. I love this country.
Okay, we go for a short break and we'll be back and then wrap up the show.
I'll rank you one first.
Welcome back. We've been talking to Umaru Fofana, the Sierra Leonean BBC journalist. Someone is asking why you've been silent a bit lately on Facebook. I mean, okay, so not to be honest, I actually kind of think you have because
Since when?
the way I saw you reporting when COVID started and it stopped eventually.
Well, COVID, I wasn't just doing journalism during COVID, I was also doing public awareness raising,
Yes.
which we needed because people were becoming
People still
obstinate.
need it.
Yeah, maybe not as much as we could. It's like the rest of the world have opened up now. So that's awareness. It's like Ebola days. I was really, really busy because I wasn't just doing journalism, informing people. I was also educating them and raising awareness. But the way it is, and sometimes people fail to realize that Umaru is an individual. It's not a company. In which case, if he's sick, his deputy comes out. No. I fall sick, I've got a family to look after, I've got fun moments as well to attend to. So I can't just be there telling people about the happenings.
But people have come to rely on you.
Yeah, but I've got a life to live as well, to be honest. So sometimes I take my feet off the brakes just to be able to rest. I could collapse tomorrow and die, my family suffers. So I need to rest. Sometimes I deliberately go, take it easy and go quietly. But even that, when things happen, I'm forced to come back and inform the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you will ask the questions, you don't get your answer now. Okay, meanwhile, you hope to be president of Sierra Leone one day, to go into politics. I mean, there's this popular Sierra Leonean blogger, Kiki Emo, she always says that if we leave politics to the politicians who are not honest, then Sierra Leone will never go to in the right direction. We, the people who think that this is how things should be done, we should come into politics. Do you hope to come into politics someday and try to see?
I can't say no, but I don't know. I've not really made up my mind on that. And I get asked this question in churches, in mosques, public places, in nightclubs. Recently I was in Bo, and a friend of mine was celebrating his birthday. And I went to a public nightclub in Bo, and people kept asking me, do you plan to get into politics? And some say, you should. And I've got a Western diplomat friend who said, I've spoken to many Sierra Leoneans who feel that A, you should get into politics. B, you will get into politics. Or C, you must get into politics. I'm not sure I have made up my mind on those, but it's people's right to believe what they believe in. But to be honest, for now, I'm concentrating on what I'm doing, which is journalism, because I feel I'm a lot more serviceable to Sierra Leoneans now as a journalist, as the kind of journalist that I am, than I would be as a minister. I've turned down political appointments. Kaba's era, Kuruma's era, this era.
So I see why I make white guys say, oh, I didn't like you. I mean, how can the guy appoint you and then you say no?
Well, the way they've been doing it is, Kaba did not personally ask me. He asked a cousin of mine who was working for him at the time that he wanted to make me presidential spokesman. And immediately there and then I said no, I was not interested. And Kuruma's era, actually everybody around Kuruma knew he and I were very good friends when he was not president. So they asked me what I want. I said, no one at him. I'm gonna do my job. And I hold the guys accountable. And even Bill, when he won, some of his guys around him said, Umaru, you want for serve? I said, no, thank you. I'm serving already. And I'm doing a far more important job, in my view, than being a minister or being an ambassador.
But you could make a whole lot of difference being a minister.
I'm not sure.
Except for example, Minister of Education, you could do a lot more as
to be honest, Jello, I do not think so. The point is, I look at the collective. I mean, personally, this is my personal opinion. I think we have a fantastic Minister of Basic Education. I feel he's one of the very good guys that Bill has in his cabinet. And I don't think I'll make a better Minister of Education than he already is.
I disagree, but let's move on.
You think I'll make a better one?
No, well,
anyway, frankly, I believe a lot in whom I serve. I have to be able to disagree with my president in the best interest of my country and not get the sack. And our society is not right for that. We've seen people who've stood for what is right, and they've been, either, ostracized or even humiliated across the party divides. So I've got to be very careful how I accept it. Maybe my values, my convictions will be such that I'll find it difficult to fit in. You know what? I was in court one day during Ali Kaba's trial for bigamy, and some lawyers were arguing amongst themselves. Well, they were virtually all in agreement that I would have been a very good lawyer, if I had chosen to study law. And then in the end, one of them turned to me and said, "Now you the conversation." And I'm like, "What is it?" He said, "Well, just because if you had been a lawyer, you would have been a fantastic lawyer, as successful as you are." And I said, "No, I could never have been half as successful a lawyer as I've been a journalist, because journalism is a liberal profession. I don't have to be bound by somebody's whims and caprices. But as a fiery lawyer, I could step on the toes of judges, I could step on the toes of fellow lawyers, and that might stunt my growth. So I believe what I'm doing right now is the right thing for my temperament, is the right thing that I can do without suffering. I know of many good lawyers who suffered because of their values, because of integrity."
Okay, that's a good one. Anyways, but what would you say to young people listening to you now? Let's say you have 1 minute to talk to young people.
I'll tell you guys that the future of this country is in your hands. Make it as less personal as possible in terms of criticizing or supporting the things that are happening in our society. Don't say this is good because the person who does it is in your interest. Don't say this is bad because the person who does it is not of interest to you. Stand up for what is right. Michael Jackson, who is my all-time favorite musician, says, "If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change." So I believe that internally, the things that you are doing that are wrong. Change those things. My father believes, and I believe in that belief of his, that up to the point of our dying, we know within ourselves whether we're going to heaven or to hell, because we know the life we lived in this world. So look internally and change the wrong ways.
Okay, final one. I didn't say they don't the Manchester United 3-1.
Is that true? No, first goal. Then give them some funny penalties. They beat Chelsea funny penalties.
Okay, this is where we become the curtains of the CGSL show tonight. Our guest has been Umaru Fofana, and I have been your presenter, Asangelo. Till we meet again in the other Sunday. See you. Have a good evening.